Your journey toward passion, fulfillment.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Hi, I'm Jay Farner, CEO of Quicken Loans, America's largest mortgage lender. Spring will be here soon, so if buying a new home is on your to-do list, right now is the time to call Quicken Loans. Learn about which mortgage options make sense for you and get a jump on your competition. With our exclusive Rate Shield approval, the low rate you lock today is protected for up to 90 days while you shop for your new home. With a Rate Shield approval, if rates go up, your low rate stays locked. But if rates go down, you get that new, even lower rate. Either way, you win. Talk to us today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com to take advantage. Here's another great reason to work with us. For a record 9 years in a row, J.D. Power has ranked Quicken Loans highest in the nation in customer satisfaction for primary mortgage origination. Again, to lock in today's low mortgage interest rate and get the security of our exclusive Rate Shield approval, call us today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com.
For J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com. Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year fixed-rate loans. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. License in all 50 states. NMLS number 3030.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Sesame Ginger Glazed Chicken Signature Wrap. How would you like it?
I'll take a...
Sports announcer at home?
Yeah, how'd you...
We just know.
My wife picks up the new Signature Wrap. It's got double the rotisserie-style chicken mixed with a sesame ginger glaze. She appears annoyed at me, but she shrugs it off. Those sweet and savory flavors are calling her name. She lifts the wrap and she takes the bite! Incredible! And now she's closing the door on my... Subway, make it what you want.
Limited time only at participating restaurants. Double meat based on average 6-inch sub.
I'm little teapot, short and stout.
Here is my handle and here is my spout.
No, Dad, like this. When I get all steamed up, then I shout, tip me over and pour me out.
This is WWE superstar Roman Reigns. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
It's the refreshingly non-political podcast about everything else.
I'm Alan Ray, and I do this for free. It is the refreshingly non-political podcast about everything else. I am your humble host, and I do this for free. Not a dime paid. You know what? The studio's getting quite crowded. I had to talk myself into doing the show tonight. Number one, I'm doing it live. Yeah. Somebody blew off work today. Mowed a whole bunch of grass, played around the yard, waiting ever so patiently for my new toy to come. And finally, about 6 o'clock, it finally got here. Of course, it's an ICOM IC2730A. Ham radio stuff. We got a good show for you tonight. Not going to be quite as interesting as He said, she said, I guarantee you, but we're going to have a Nerdfest. Yes, we are. To the nth degree. Gotta love it. Don't go anywhere. Let's get this on. Yeah, it's been one of those weeks, I guarantee you. You know, I try to pick out content for this show, and I see things sometimes that I'm going, yeah, one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing, leads to another thing, and it's kind of interesting. You know, right now, apparently in St. Vincent Island down in the, there's an eruption going on in a volcano. An eruption's rocked St. Vincent on Wednesday as much of the Caribbean island remains buried under ash. On northern part of islands, eruptions from La Soufrière volcano have displaced roughly 20,000 people. With 4,000 of those living in shelters around the island, government officials said Wednesday. The National Emergency Management Organization, or NEMO for St. Vincent, and the Grenadines said on Facebook that explosions and accompanying ashfall of similar or larger magnitude are likely to continue to occur over the next few days. So they got problems down there. Oh, yes, they do. And it looks like the sound is being sketchy back and forth, and that started happening right at the end of He Said, She Said in my world. Hopefully it's nothing going on my end. We're going to see. I'm thinking it's not, because really, honestly, yeah, well, it could very well be. My internet connection is lost, and yeah, everything's kind of going to heck around here. Hopefully it's going to come in again now, but yeah, no. Is it going to happen? Let's see. Might have some internet problems here. All right, we're back. They're saying I'm back now. That's a good thing. We're going to keep going. Yeah, hopefully it's not fading in and out too much, but I don't know what the heck would be wrong with our internet. Things get sketchy. We're out here in the middle of the cornfields. Life is kind of crazy. Let's try something here. And maybe this will do it. All right, let's see if that speeds things up a little bit. Hopefully it does. Who knows? So there you go. We've had a volcano eruption, and you know it's kind of crazy. It really does get kind of crazy. We don't know what's going on with Saint Vincent. We'll find out, but it's kind of interesting. Volcanoes are one of those things that every time one of them starts really getting crazy, it piques my interest. It really does. Volcanoes are cool. I like them. And we are at a point with technology. We're at a point with the way we can do things where NASA has actually, they use satellites now to detect signs of volcano unrest years before eruptions start. The new methodology is based on a subtle but significant increase in like heat emissions over large areas of a volcano in the years leading up to its eruptions, said the author Tarsilo Girona, formerly of JPL and now with University of Alaska Fairbanks. It allows us to see that a volcano has reawakened, often well before any of the other signs have appeared. The study team analyzed 16 and a half years of radiant heat data from the moderate resolution imaging spectral diameters instruments aboard NASA's Terra and Aqua satellites. For several types of volcanoes, they have erupted in the past 2 decades. Despite the differences between the volcanoes, the results were uniform. In the years leading up to an eruption, like what we got going on at St. Vincent in the Virgin Islands, the radiant surface temperatures over much of the volcano increased by around 1 degree Celsius from its normal state. It decreased after each eruption. Now, we're not talking about hot spots here. Rather, we're talking about the warming of large areas of the volcano. This is the co-author Paul Lundgren of JPL says. So it's likely related to a fundamental process happening at depth. In particular, the scientists believe that the heat increase may result from the interaction between magma reservoirs and hydrothermal systems. Now, we know magma contains gases and other fluids. When it rises through a volcano, the gases diffuse to the surface and can give off heat. Similarly, this degassing can facilitate the upflow of underground water and the elevation of the water table, as well as hydrothermal circulation, which can increase soil temperature. So what they're doing is they're looking at this data as a whole. They're combining data. The new method is significant on its own, but it may provide even more insight into volcano behavior when combined with data from models and other satellites. In a study published in Scientific Reports last summer, Lundgren used interferometric synthetic aperture radar, what they call INSAR, to analyze long-term deformations in Argentina's Domeyuo volcano. At the time, scientists weren't certain whether Domeyuo was a dormant or extinct volcano or whether it was just a mountain. Lundgren's research cleared that up quickly. He unexpectedly detected a period of inflation, which is when part of a volcano expands as a new mass of magma moves upwards and pushes the rock out of the way. It turns out Domeyuo, or however you say that, is very much a volcano, and it's an active one. So next, Lundgren compared this deformation time series to a thermal time series that Girona created for the same Domeyuo volcano, however you say that. And Lundgren's goal was to determine whether the two processes, an increase in both radiant surface temperature over large areas of the volcano and deformation, were connected. And they found that the thermal time series very much mimicked the deformation time series, but with some time separation. Even though it remains unclear which process is likely to happen first in their eyes, by showing the correlation, they connected the processes through a physics-based interpretations. So basically, by combining the data sets, they got clues about what was happening deeper under the earth and under the volcano. So using this data, they're going to test thermal time series methods on more volcanoes and continue to fine-tune its precision. So what's going on there in St. Vincent right now in the Caribbean islands is actually something that they've probably been studying, they're probably going to study, and use the same method when it starts cooling down. So it's kind of neat that they're studying this stuff, and going forward, they're going to be able to predict these big volcanoes going off. And to me, it's kind of funny. I'm reading all of this stuff, and when a volcano goes off, especially when there's a bad eruption, it spews just tons and tons and tons and tons of volcanic ash into the atmosphere. And this, there was a big one when my son was first born. My oldest son was first born. I think that was the one out in Washington, Mount St. Helens. And we had for like 2 years after that, we had horrible cold weather. In fact, I remember the spring or the summer that he was born. He was born at the end of May. We basically had to have jackets on almost all summer long. It never did really warm up. It was kind of crazy. So I'm looking at all of this, and lo and behold, right in the middle of all of that, and I don't know if you realize what's going on. People are blocking him left and right, but Bill Gates has this boneheaded idea that he wants to toss a bunch of particles up into the atmosphere to try to cool the planet. And he wants to do this as a test in Sweden. Now, I ran across this article in futurism.com, And it says scientists warn that blocking out the sun could have unintended consequences. Whoa, you think? Really? You think it might? When you try to play God, sometimes things backfire. You should know just from, what we saw in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, when man versus nature, a lot of times nature wins. It just takes a little bit of time. Nature will eventually win. This article says in a last-ditch effort to try and stave off the worst impacts of climate change, scientists have debated for years over whether it would help to try stratospheric aerosols injection. Basically, the theory goes they try to disperse particles into the atmosphere that would reflect sunlight back away from the Earth. But a pair of new academic reports, probably made by people who are actually smart, suggest that it might make sense to hold off on any geoengineering experiments until we actually know what impacts they'll have on the Earth. Sure, models suggest that injected reflective particles into the atmosphere would help cool the planet, but scientists still seem to have a weak understanding of what ecological impacts the experiments might have. The authors of a new report published Monday in the journal PNAS don't necessarily condemn stratospheric aerosol injection. Instead, they suggest it could cause unintended side effects, potentially damaging ecosystems, and that we ought to know what will happen before we try it out. Oh, you think? Geoengineering advocates don't have the details that ecologists like to look at very fine scales, study co-author and Rutgers University environmental scientist Alan Robach told Ars Technica. They could do with better simulations, but for that, we would need better data. The National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine arrived at a similar conclusion in the 329-page document it published last month, in which experts suggested cautiously pursuing the technology. The authors call for improved cooperation among experts in various fields, which they say has been sorely lacking. Geoengineering researchers need to work closely with ecologists, they argue, in order to actually figure out what their technology might do to the planet before it's deployed. What a great idea, right? I think the main message from both reports, Christopher Field, who is the chair of the National Academy's committee behind the older document, told ARS Technica, is that we would need to understand a lot more about the impacts before we did anything. Yeah, that's a really, really good idea. Yeah, and I don't know why they want to mess with the atmosphere. I mean, nature has a way of taking care of itself. It really does. And I know they're freaking out over what they call climate change. I personally, in the 55 years I've been alive, watched the climate go from them freaking out about the next ice age to freaking out about global warming. And then because it wasn't really warming, they just started calling it man-made climate change. Now, this is a non-political show, so I'm not going to get into what I think about all that. But let's just say this.
There's something wrong with us. Something very, very wrong with us.
Stop trying to play God, Bill Gates, just because you have a few $1 million hanging around. Thank you very much. You spew a bunch of crap into there, start off another ice age, and yeah, then what are you going to do? So there you have it. The show is running a little bit short. We are already at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to take a little break, which is fine. Really, it's fine because I really don't have a lot going on. Mowed grass all day, worked out in the yard all day. My face is sunburnt. But I tell you what, got my vitamin D, and we come back, we're going to talk about that. Don't go anywhere.
Listen now and don't forget, if you go for that solid jive, you can always keep the dream alive. Palin with Al.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
Attention business owners and independent contractors. This is a money-saving message from Tax Mediation Services. If your business owes $20,000 or more in taxes, we can help you today, right now. Listen, dealing with the IRS is no picnic. It's an intimidating and extremely stressful process, and you don't want to go it alone. Our attorneys know every law, every tax break, and every possible opportunity to help you resolve and reduce your tax debt. And if you owe more than $20,000, you may be at the top of their hit list. So don't take your tax debt lightly, because it will not go away on its own. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, your home, and even shut down your business. Call our tax experts today at 1-800-783-0810 and let us deal with the IRS while you focus on your business. That's 1-800-783-0810. Again, that's 800-783-0810.
I just can't get rid of that song. I don't know. Maybe because it has my name in it. I don't know. But I just leave it on there. Yeah, I mean, how many people, as somebody famous, wrote a song about named Al? There's just not that many. So I'll just keep it. It is a refreshingly non-political podcast about everything else. I am live tonight. Why? Because I blew off work. Why? Because, well, I just have a whole lot to do, and I had my new toy coming in, and I really didn't want, an expensive toy like that sitting out on the porch for everybody to gawk at while I'm at work. And amongst other things, I've got vacation to burn. They're starting to harass me saying, hey, you got to take vacation or you're going to lose it. All right, twist my arm. Take a day off? Sure. So I did. So I'm doing this live. Aren't you blessed? You get to hear me live tonight and Sunday night, Lord willing, if I don't crash and burn between now and then. So let's really talk some nerd stuff. You probably may or may not have heard this term. You may or not have run across it, but we are now coming up to Cycle 25. Now, you have no idea what Cycle 25 is, do you? Cycle 25 is the new solar cycle. And let me just take a pause here for just a moment and address the chat room. Guys, thank you so much for hanging around. Ron, my new toy is a new ham radio. It's an ICOM IC2730A. It's, man, it's really cool. The problem I have so far is I don't have a programming cable, but you know, thank you, Amazon. It is on the way. Wednesday, I'll have that baby programmed and rocking. But even just before I came on air, I was doing some cool things with it. All ham radio stuff. Oh, and by the way, I also am now officially going for the next level of the ham radio, the general licensing. The general licensing basically gives you a whole lot more frequencies open to do your ham radio stuff. And what we're going to talk about right now ties into that directly. Solar Cycle 25 really basically technically started in 2019. Now, if you don't know what a solar cycle is, every 11 years, the sun begins pretty much a new solar cycle. And it's marked by periods of violent eruptions and magnetic explosions that send flashes of radiation into space. The new solar cycle began in December of 2019, to be exact. And on Tuesday, NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is NOAA, which if you don't have a NOAA weather radio, why not? I preach to you people all the time. Announced it will be similar to the last cycle. Now, the last cycle was kind of weak, and they're going off of models, and they're looking at some things, and this one may be kind of weak too. Truth be told, they don't really know. Considered relatively calm, that cycle included the weakest solar maximum since 1928. Now, that was the last one we had. Calm or not, the new solar cycle will still impact life on Earth as well as future space voyages. And that's what I want to talk about, probably for the rest of the show. Now, people wonder what a solar cycle is and, you know, why this is Solar Cycle 25. Well, the numbering of the cycles began in 1755. We've known about solar cycles since 1755. Can you believe that? And although it began in December 2019, it takes up to 10 months for scientists to determine when the new cycle actually began, since the sun is a variable star. Now, I can't even pronounce this person's name. I can pronounce their first name, Lika Guhathkurta, a solar scientist at Heliophysics divisions of NASA, says, as we emerge from solar minimum, which we've been in solar minimum for a while now, and approach Cycle 25's maximum, it is important to remember solar activity never stops. It changes forms as the pendulum swings. Now, the Solar Cycle 25 prediction panel, did you know that there's actually a Solar Cycle prediction panel? You do now. Yeah, it's my goal. I tell you this all the time. It's my goal to have you learn something and walk away from the show just a little bit smarter than when you get into it. It's an international team of experts basically on the sun. They agreed that the next solar cycle will be similar to the last one. This may mean the end of a weakening solar cycle trend, with each cycle exhibiting less activity than the one before. For the past 50 years, around 4 solar cycles or so, the sun has been unusually active. Now, the year 2019 saw an unusually low number of sunspots, with a total of 281 days where there were no sunspots on the sun. And hopefully I'm not fading in and out again. I'm looking at my phone. My phone's being kind of wanky, and it just told me that, oh, hey, you lost internet connection again. So hopefully I'm not lost again. But anyways, well, this caused some speculations and a bit of panic during that solar minimum, because it was just really, there was 281 days where there were no sunspots at all. And it caused some speculation that the sun would undergo another Maunder minimum, a period between 1645 and 1715, where reduced activity was paired with severe drop in temperatures in the northern hemisphere. Now, we know that the Maunder minimum, a lot of that was also complicated by what? volcano eruptions. It wasn't just the sun. However, the team of experts now is pretty hopeful about cycle 25. Now, what is a solar cycle? Solar activity largely depends on the sun's magnetic field. Now, the sun's magnetic field goes through a periodic cycle in which the south and the north poles essentially switch spots. They just reverse each other. And it takes another 11 years or so for them to switch back. So not like Earth, it's kind of going back and forth. The sun's activity starts increasing halfway through the cycle, meaning more solar flare-ups and outflow of radiation from the host star. Now, its activity, meanwhile, is measured by sunspots. And it's kind of cool. Yeah, it's solar minimum and Bill Gates wants to dim the sun. It affects space weather more than it affects the weather here on Earth. Now, a lot of people, and it does, let me back up a little bit. It does affect weather here on Earth. Not really as much as you think it would, but it does. Now, if you combine that with something, and quite honestly, this is kind of disturbing too. I'm watching this volcano erupt in St. Vincent. And I'm watching now, I think they said that this solar maximum will not peak until 2035. But from now until 2035, we're going to see just how big the solar maximum gets. But between the volcano eruption, if we have another big eruption, if we spew a bunch more stuff into the atmosphere, combined with the solar flares, we could end up having some weather like we did when I was a kid back in the 70s, where it seemed like every other week we were taking cover from a tornado. We had huge blizzards, all of the fun stuff that come with that. But the sun is an active star. And you have to realize that periodically subjected to events like coronal mass ejections, high-speed solar winds, and solar flares, during a solar maximum, that stuff increases. That stuff kind of goes nuts. And these ejections can cause magnetic storms in the Earth's upper atmosphere, which can affect power grids, satellites, and orbiting spacecraft and astronauts. Now, what does this have to do with us here on this planet? Well, let's talk about that for a bit. It does, in essence, kind of affect the weather. Not as much as people think it does. It does affect it. Anything that happens, from the sun ejecting out like that will, increase how the weather, is affected here. We are planning on going to Mars. We're planning on going to the moon. Okay. They have to take this into consideration when they're doing space travel. The solar cycles, what's happening in space, all of this has to be taken into consideration when shooting astronauts into space, because it's all radiation. And the more stuff spews out from the sun towards the Earth, the more radiation these people are exposed to. And one of the articles I was reading, I was studying up on this. One of the experts at NASA says, there's no such thing as a good or a bad storm. There's only good or bad preparedness for the storm. And I know I'm cutting in and out again because I'm watching my phone kind of freak out. So hopefully I'm back with you guys again. But space travel's one thing. There's also stuff like satellite communications, cell phone signal, things like that. Really hard mass coronal ejections can screw up cell phone signals, things like that. Shoot, it might be screwing up my satellite or my internet right now. I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, we know that. One of the cool things, if you're me, about this, about the sun starting to kick off and starting to head towards a solar maximum, is radio frequencies. Now, solar maximums are great, absolutely outstanding for ham radio, for shortwave radio, for long radio waves. And let me explain something to you just a bit. At the risk of getting too nerdy, Do a little experiment, okay? And basically these coronal, these cycles, these maximums, they affect the ionosphere more than anything. To prove this point, if you want to know how the ionosphere works, do this. If you're far away from Nashville, there are certain radio stations that are pretty powerful, but this one always occurs to me. During the day, 650 is a AM radio station in Nashville, Tennessee. I've actually watched these people broadcast from the Opryland Hotel in Nashville. And 650, you just can't get during the day here. At night, 6:50 a.m. comes in like it's in your hometown. Why does that happen? Well, let's talk about that. The ionosphere, and you have to know this stuff when you become a ham operator. This is one of the things they test the crap out of you on. There's different layers in the ionosphere. And they've got these layers basically named, there's D, E, F1, F2. During the day, the ionosphere, especially in the D and E area, are real thick. Now that ionosphere bounces radio waves. When it's hanging low to the earth, when you've got, during the daytime, all of this chemical, and I'm not going to go into the chemical reaction that's going on because, time constraints. But basically what happens is during the day, you've got all of these levels of ionosphere. And radio signals are trying to, scatter around, and the ionosphere reflects them back down. Now, if that's hanging really low, like in the D and E layers, it doesn't get out very much. It's what they call propagation. It just bounces, goes in, absorbs, whatever it does. At night, and because of the sun and the coronal ejections and all of the stuff that happens, basically what happens is the ions dissipate at night. And the D and the E layer at night in your area vanish. And the F1 and the F2 layer become a single layer. Now, these are hard layers. It's just kind of when they've known about them for a long time. It's just when they go into space, they took some samples and they went, okay, these kind of go in layers, and the ions do this at this layer, they do this at this layer, and they just thicken up over here. Well, what happens at night is because the F1 and F2 layer combine and they're way up above the Earth, like 600 meters or 600 kilometers above Earth. Sometimes 400 to 600. It's flexing. It's, a lot of things really affect it. But because they're way up there, long radio waves, like an AM or short wave, they hit those and bounce back down. Hit those and bounce back down. And they'll go all the way across the planet. When you're listening to short wave, especially at night, a lot of times you can get down into the really long radio waves. Now, by long radio waves, let me explain. When you're in an AM or, in that area, your radio waves are really long. They're literally waves. They have peaks and they have valleys. And long radio waves from peak to peak are just longer. So the ionosphere up there, it combines, these ions are acting, basically they're splitting up and they're pulling back together, and they're thick, and the radio waves bounce off of those and come back down. And the higher up it is and the thicker it is, the better it bounces. Now, really honestly, and it's really hard to explain, and I could do another 2 hours on this, but study the ionosphere. And you'll know why at nighttime you can get a California station here in Michigan. You can get a Nashville, Tennessee radio station here in Michigan. Boston, you can get here in Michigan. And in the daytime, you can't because of this bounce. Now, you throw in activity from the sun a solar maximum, solar 25. This is how important cycle 25 is to ham radio operators. You can literally go on ARRL, which is the national, American Radio League. It's what you sign up for when you're a ham radio operator. You can go on that site and get a coffee cup that says cycle 25 on it. People are stoked. They're stoked. They're excited about it because it means that this time of from now until the peak and even afterwards, you can get radio waves from all over the world that you haven't been able to get during a solar minimum. The solar maximum increases the effectiveness of the ionosphere. So not only do you get different things going on with weather, satellite problems and stuff like that, when you're a ham radio operator, this is what they live for. So there you have it. The cycle 25 is going to be peaking. It's on, it's going. The scientists all confirmed it. We're rocking with cycle 25. Now, whether it gets whether it's a good one, and by good one, especially if you're me, it means that there's a lot more sunspots. They measure these things by sunspots per day and stuff like that. There's a whole science behind it. And yes, believe it or not, there are websites you can go to where this lady actually does a weather forecast for the sun. I'm not even kidding you. I had no idea about this, but if you go on QRZ.com, which QRZ is kind of the ham radio operators, that's where everybody kind of goes for their news and networking and stuff like that. There's actually a broadcast that you can watch where this lady does a weather forecast for the sun and sunspots and sun activity. It's actually pretty cool. Not to mention she's kind of hot. Anyway, so there you have it. If you hear somebody talking about cycle 25, now you know what they're talking about. It's all ionospheric. And already in chat, you're going to have to Google ionosphere. There's so much science behind it, it would take me another 2 or 3 shows to describe it. So there you have it. Oh, what else do we have going on today? Oh, yeah. Vitamin D. I ran across an article that basically says vitamin D deficiency, they're now finding may impair muscle function. Now, vitamin D is pretty important. But let's just browse this for a second and talk about it. Vitamin D deficiency may impair muscle function due to a reduction in energy production in the muscles, according to a mouse study published by Journal of Endocrinology. Vitamin D deficient mice were found to have impaired muscle mitochondrial function, which may have implications for muscle function, performance, and recovery. This may suggest that preventing vitamin D deficiency in older adults could help maintain better muscle strength and function and reduce age-related muscle deterioration. But further studies are needed to confirm this. Now, vitamin D is kind of a weird vitamin. Vitamin D is kind of a hormone and a vitamin all at the same time. It's a hormone, and they call it the sun vitamin because basically when you're out in the sun, your body produces vitamin D. There's never been a better time, really, honestly, to be outside, to be soaking up the sun, and we know already that vitamin D is good for bones, it's good for growth, it's good for mood, all kinds of stuff. The problem is we live in a society that doesn't get enough sun. Even worse, we live in a society that for the past year has been told to stay inside. Well, I think you're going to find out really quick that is wrong. Very wrong. Dr. Andrew Phillip and his team at the Garvan Institute of Medical Research in Australia and collaborating universities used a mouse model to determine the effects of diet-induced vitamin D deficiency on skeletal muscles, mitochondrial functions in young male mice. This was affecting things like their muscle, basically the muscle growth, muscle repair. We also know that basically, vitamin D deficiency has been reported to be as prevalent as 40% in European populations and linked to increased risk for several conditions, including COVID-19, but also cancer and diabetes. Get out there, get your sun. Go for walks. You know, and that's the thing. And I don't want to preach to you because of we're coming up on the top of the hour, but we are entering a time where, I mean, for the past year, they've been shut down. For the past year, people have been closed in. They've been told not to go outside. It's anti-productive. You need vitamin D. Bone health, immune health, mental health, wound healing, infant health. And, you know, you can get it from foods. Cereals have been fortified. Dairy gets fortified with vitamin D. Orange juice gets fortified with vitamin D. If you want it naturally, fish, cod liver oil, that stuff is all high in vitamin D naturally. Mushrooms, and now not the ones that make you see funny things. Mushrooms in your salad, mushrooms in your pizza, mushrooms like that. Mushrooms are one of the best plant-based dietary sources of vitamin D outside of fortified milk and alternatives. They're natural. Get your vitamin D. You need it. You need it to help fight this pandemic. I know that the CDC goes back and forth, waivers back and forth. Governors are going back and forth about, oh, you can't go outside. You can't go outside. Get outside. Get outside, especially starting now. Get outside and get sun in your face. Get vitamin D in your system. The best way to do it is to be out in the sun, getting fresh air and exercise, and having your body produce it naturally. You won't be sorry. All right. I am at the back up at the top of the hour. I'm going to call it a night. And just so you guys know in the chat room, yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the actual recorded version of this just in case the version that's been live is cutting in and out. So because there's some really good stuff in here. I encourage you to listen to it. Thank you so much for being with me. I'm going to be back Sunday night, Lord willing, and my internet doesn't keep wanking out on me. I'm going to be back Sunday night with Circumspice, the right side of Michigan. We got a whole lot of things to talk about Michigan. And then next week, next Friday night at 10 o'clock, you will hear the Hardcore Patriot. Keep it locked on KLRNRadio all week long. You'll love yourself if you do. I will talk to you later. I'm Alan Ray. This is the Refreshingly Non-Political Podcast about everything else. Have a great weekend. Remember, get out there and get in the sun. We'll talk again soon.
Let's make sure we keep talking.